IP addresses, locations, date, and so on. So we can access to this information from the Azure AD portal and going for the Azure AD Identity Protection report sections on it. But now that everything is consolidated into the Microsoft 365 Defender portal and its suite of products, also we can find out this exactly the same information from the context of the 365 Defender, Defender for Endpoint, or the Microsoft Cloud Application Security. Into the multiple user interface portals, we can display exactly the same information, like the risk detected for these users, basically, in a form of incidents or alerts, basically. So let me show you with a quick demonstration also on. So basically, if we want to access from the Azure AD portal context, we can go for portal.azure.com, sign in with my same credential, the global administrator. I understand that this is detecting the directory risk or the users attempting to sign in. So the service that controls the sign-in events is the Azure AD service. So I'm accessing to the Azure AD service. I am scrolling down the management section from the left vertical menu and locating the security options. I can click on it. Then I will find out a submenu that I will be redirected from the user interface, and I will locate the protect section on. Into the protect section, I will select the identity protection or the Azure AD identity protection options. I will click on it, and I will be redirected to another submenu with different sections: protecting, reporting, and notifying, for example. So this is the identity protection user interface, or the original user interface, where under the protect, I can turn on the policies and I can configure the user risk to react and the access control. For example, into my user risk policy, I have from the scope 2 users that I'm including into these policies. I can specify all of my users, or I can select with a list a limited number of groups and all these members, or a limited number of users, which is in this case, I'm just selecting 2 objects from my directory that this policy will consider. And then, well, the controls to be enforced, the reacting on a risk detected as low and above, for example, with a high restriction, medium and above only, or just reacting to the high risk. And then the access controls, either to block the access or either to allow the access, or allow the access with condition, like forcing a password reset change, or by accessing to the sign risk policy, and from the access control, allow the access, but also require the user to require or force it to use multi-factor authentication in the case that the user is not already using in the MFA. Then this is the control for activating or deactivating the policy. All the time, either if we are consuming the premium license, the policy will be set to off as a default condition. But now a valid administrator, security admin, or global administrator can decide to turn on this policy. Be careful, because with the highest restriction and using the all users option, that it's a configuration that we should avoid, we can block ourselves and we are not going to be able to sign in until there is no risk conditions detected on. Remember that with the most restrictive configuration is reacting on risk level from the low and above, basically. So avoid that configuration for the higher restriction with low and above, and to all the users, basically, because we can block ourselves. It's a good idea to have under the knowledge of this administrator team an excluding option with a couple of emergency accounts, just in case. Those are going to be accounts that we'll never consider under the scope of these policies by pre-configuring for security reasons into the exclude tab. And we can specify a couple of emergency accounts with global administrator role access, for example, that in the case that you're blocking yourself with your global administrator account, you understand that there is a couple of accounts that nobody's using, are there just for emergency with that level of access, and you can start reconfiguring your policy, and those accounts we will never consider under the scope of the risk detected on. So you can sign in with those other accounts, and then turning off temporarily the policy and reconfigure your scope and removing your user, for example, on. So once that there is some risk detected, I just use this tenant also for forcing a risk detection on it. Let me explain you how I just force a risk detected from this policy for testing it. And I will explain to you by going to the reporting section. Into the reporting section, for example, we can find out a list of risky users. Like, for example, I can see the risk last updated. This was detected the last December the 9th, last week, December the 6th, and November the 30th, for example, like a couple of weeks ago. And the three users involved: my global administrator, Alex Wilber, and Adele Banson. Risky sign-ins that I can display here from the list on my history, that I can play a little bit with the filters to display some information about my risky events on. And then I can see some more information into this table view. The user involved, the date and the timestamp, an IP address involved, a location for that, and a risk state for that. All these users are reported as risk conditions, for example. We can click on that date link for looking at the more deeper information about this option. The signing tab was interactive. The user is the MOD administrator. This is the username, the same account that I'm using right now. The application that I was attempting to access to the Azure portal, this same user interface, a resource ID, an IP address reported, a location here, a date and a status, success, and a client application. I was using a browser. Some more the device information, risk information, a detection type from a new country, for example. Because, well, I used to sign in from the computer that I'm using, for example, for this delivery, and I'm located on a different country than the United States, basically. So the pattern for that global administrator is reporting to sign in from a different country by evaluating the source IP address. Suddenly, when I'm just attempting to sign in from a virtual machine created in some North America data center, so it is detecting like a new country that was something as an anomaly or not detected previously for this user, basically. So that is flagging a risk. And then, well, depending on my policy, is blocking me or allowing me with conditions, basically. So all this information also, we will find it into the risk detection view. Detection type, new country, unfamiliar signing process, anonymous IP address, impossible travel, unfamiliar signing process, and so on. And a risk level detected automatically, medium, high, medium, or high. For example, the user at risk, a request ID, and more deeper information by clicking on the timestamp, which uses a URL, and we can find out and be redirected to different signing events. Now, like I said, from the security portal, we can also access to this information by going to the 365 Defender and displaying the incidents or alerts view, for example. Into the incidents, we can find out some incident names, for example, and we will find out that there's, okay, activity from infrequent country involving one user. Okay, let's take a deeper look at that user to find out what is the user. And the entity type is the administrator. Or I can take a look at the different entities into the tabs on the top, and I can find out what is the user display name and its email address. And by clicking on this information, I can display some more deeper information that it will actually be the same. And well, more into the focus on the investigation, basically, from this one. An investigation priority, the risk detected, it's a medium. Active alert for this. This is a user exposure on it, last seen December the 13th, 2021, today, because I'm already authenticated with the same account. 3 accounts associated with the same type of incident, an email for this contact information, and so on. Okay, so I can see, okay, confirm user is compromised. It was a real risk, or I can suspend the user for signing in, require the user to sign in again, force it, going for the Azure AD account settings to the Azure portal and view the own files for the user. So I can see more information about for managing the reaction or the actions to take on this one. If there were mailboxes involved, devices or endpoints involved, I can see it from there. Or I can start to go for an investigation or delegating the investigation to another security specialist on. Some evidence and responses, like one reported IP address from here, and then suspicious with this reported IP address, with the risk, And then I can go for, okay, add to allow a block list rule for this IP address, or going hunting, or showing some geo information. And by showing this geo information, we can find, okay, a city, a postal code, country, region, and state, the carrier, and up to including the coordinates on. By going hunting, we can access to the hunting area, which we will find out an area for running custom query language queries against the source of the repository of logs that we are correlating basically on it. So we can find out an schema with different table names. And when I wanted to run something, like for example, looking at the alert evidence table, I can double click on it to run a query for that, and I can display results on it. The query can run in a second and display thousands of records information from all of the logs that we are collecting by running these queries that uses KQL syntax, custom query language on it, that uses a table name and that specify some information about this. If I'm clicking on the results, for example, I can just run this built-in query by clicking on run the query, and I will expect to see some results on this one. If there is some information associated to the source IP address and modifying the time range and so on, and different conditions on. From the schema, I can dynamically also add in a table name for querying. But well, if I'm not using the filtering, I'm just basically attempting to display all the information included into this table that could be thousands of records on. Like for example, from the service source, from the Microsoft Cloud Application Security option, some evidence, because I'm looking at the alert evidence option on. And I can see some more information about this by clicking on that particular row displayed from the results on. That what is the type of evidence for this global administrator, the UPN suffix, and so on. So we can go deep for a deeper investigation from the main view of the incidents and alerts detected on. From the alerts, also we can see that there is a activity from infrequent country detected on, based on this global administrator history created, for example. So this same information can be correlated to the user interface or from the Cloud Application Security Portal, from the Defender for 365, and so on, from different other portals